The Dyslexia Duo wants to know, do you want to get your name out there? Well, we can help you gain brand awareness. We build better brands simply by taking your own vision for your business and helping it reach a wide variety of audiences.
Benefits to advertising on the Dyslexia Duo podcast include direct access to a diverse audience of parents, caregivers, and educators, association with experts in the field. Also, continuous traffic to the podcast means repeated exposure to your brand. You will be supporting a small business that advocates for children's education and options available to obtain measurable results.
Just contact us either through Facebook at The Dyslexia Duo or through email, thedyslexiaduo@gmail.com.
Thank you.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Amy.
So today, and we always record on Sunday, we always appreciate every guest that comes on, but giving up your weekend is always a big deal.
For sure.
Today, we had Marilyn Zecher with Multisensory Math on our show.
Yeah, she was so informative, and I actually really appreciated everything that she shared with us. And I know that the listening audience is going to be really appreciative of that information too, because she broke down math in a really easy way to understand. And you guys all know that I've talked about my math problems.
Yeah, no, made lots of connections.
Yeah, oh, so many. And it really is interesting too, because it connected to our language therapy that we talk so much about.
Mm-hmm, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about who Marilyn Zecher is. If you've heard of multisensory math, and she's a big leader in that field. So she's a CALT. So she's a certified academic language therapist.
Woo.
Yahoo! In the application of OG multisensory strategies for teaching math, study skills, reading, and language, Spanish, and content area subjects.
Ms. Zecher is a former classroom and demonstration teacher in the Orton-Gillingham-based public school program. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Education and a Bachelor's of Arts and a Master of Arts in English.
So in 2004, Ms. Zecher, she told us to call her Marilyn, so let's just pretend like we're on a first name basis. Marilyn received her certification as an academic therapist specializing in multisensory mathematics and study skills.
And then she went on to help to develop ASDEC's multisensory mathematics program that applied to Orton-Gillingham instructional techniques to the teaching of mathematics.
And she's been a frequent presenter for IDA and LDA and the National Teachers of Mathematics National and Regional Conferences. And she has trained in both public and private school teachers, as well as academic therapists in multisensory mathematics, instructional techniques, handwriting, multisensory study skills, and educational strategies for the gifted and talented students. We learned so much today. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I know it's a little bit of a different approach, but it's not, because math is also a language, just like reading and spelling is. And we should learn all we can.
That was kind of mind-blowing to me, to think about math being language.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, really interesting. So here we go.
All right. Y'all hold tight, because here we go with Marilyn Zecher. And this is Amy.
And Melissa.
And we're the Dyslexia Duo. Hi, this is Amy.
And Melissa. We are a couple of retired Texas teachers who are CALTs, certified academic language therapists. We started our own businesses, and now we have a podcast called
The Dyslexia Duo. So join us for our informative podcast, where we'll delve into dyslexia, covering the topics that affect parents, therapists, teachers, practitioners, and anyone who wants to learn more. We'll guide you through everything you need to know, from the first signs to the intricacies of dyslexia curriculum placement and beyond.
This season, we will cover the referral process, what to expect when your child or student is dyslexic, the generational impacts of dyslexia, and how to support those affected.
Come join us! Melissa.
Hey, Amy.
So today we have a very special guest.
I'm excited to meet Miss Marilyn.
Yeah, because you've been very, very vocal about struggling all your life with math. And I've had difficulty with math, but not to the point that you've discussed it.
Yes, I really have. And I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. And if maybe you could diagnose me with dyscalculia, like over this podcast.
Well, I was diagnosed on a basketball court, so anything's possible.
Okay, so I might get the answers to my questions today.
So this is Marilyn Zecher. So if you would just introduce yourself to our audience, we have, and I say it every time, they're probably just saying it around with me. We have a pretty diverse group that listens to us. It's global, which is wonderful. But we have parents, we have educators, we have dyslexia therapists, we have decision makers in districts that are listening to the podcast. So go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience and tell them who you are, if you want to say where you live, and what you do.
Well, my name is Marilyn Zecher. I have been working in the field of dyslexia since back before the dinosaurs. I was originally trained in Orton-Gillingham methodology in 1976.
Wow.
And so I have taught all ages. I'm certified K-12 as an educator. I have an advanced professional certificate in reading. And for the last 25 years of my life, I've dedicated it to applying what I know works for learning and for teaching in a multisensory methodology to mathematics. And it began because I was teaching older students to read, write, and spell, and many of them were failing algebra. So I sought out people to study with. And then when those people retired, I took over teaching the classes. And I currently teach 2 graduate level courses in multisensory math.
Wow.
With a nonprofit in Maryland. So I'm just outside of Washington, D.C., but I have worked in the public schools. I've done a lot of training in both public and independent schools and a lot of private academic therapy, which is really important because I think both of you would understand that when you work with a student one-on-one, they teach you more than you teach them because you really learn how they process information. So I've continued to study in math. I update my courses regularly, but I do have both of these courses, which have allowed me to continue really interacting with the research, the methodology, and discover new ways to teach math. I have some summer intervention programs for students with learning challenges, and they're my lab. I still work with those students and I learn what works and what doesn't. And so I'm constantly refining things and reaching out to universities and researchers. And it's just been wonderful to be able to impact students' lives. But I train teachers and parents, tutors and parents. I train anybody who will listen. I'll talk to them about what are the best ways to help all of our students be better in math. My work now is being used at the university level to help students with hearing impairments. I've been training math coaches in public school districts. I've worked with, as I say, with both private and public schools, working with teachers. I've had a lot of tutors take my work. A lot of academic language therapists, they recognize that to teach the whole child, you have to include math. Math is really tied up with language. And so I work a lot with people who are trained in either OG methods or certified through MSLIC or ALTA. And I do a lot of work with individuals and parents. My courses are offered globally, and I have workshops that I offer that people can I want to learn some better methods. What can I do to help my child or this child or that child or this class?
Yeah.
So I've been doing the multisensory math now, began in the early 1990s with older students. And I began teaching the courses after Dr. Joyce Steeves, who was an Orton Fellow, member of the IDA. She worked at the Jemison School in Baltimore with Steve Chen, one of our researchers. And so when she stopped teaching the class, I took over, and I've been teaching it now 21 years.
Wow. That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible.
Are the workshops that you offer, are they nationwide, or how does that work?
Internationally.
Oh.
I have in my class, the manual I wrote that comes with my full course, I've shipped to Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Indonesia, Europe. I've had people from Africa take my course. I've got a guy in my class right now who's in Southern Africa and Mozambique. So I have to coordinate my video conferences so that everybody in the world can attend either morning or night. And and the workshops and some of the webinars I do are available online. I have a couple that are for free or very, very low cost. And I do some of my training with recorded workshops because schools can't always afford hefty fees for speakers. So I try to make things affordable for schools and districts and parents. And so I work with people to try to get something to help the students.
That's a great idea. Oh, my goodness.
And where can people find these things? Because I'm going to be looking it up.
My website is multisensorymath.com, and I need to update it. I update it a couple of times a year, but I'm really busy. So I don't get to do a lot of the tech I'd like to do. The workshops are on multisensorymath.online. And I just put a free one up there the other day for the holidays. And so I have a variety of things like how to teach algebraic concepts with manipulative objects, how to support broad math concepts at home for parents. That's always free. And then when IDA and Alta groups hire me to do a webinar, I often will give them exclusive rights to that video. And then a year later, I make it available for other people.
Wow.
So it depends. But I'm frequently speaking for IDA and Alta groups.
Yeah.
So if your local IDA or Alta group is sponsoring webinars or things, you can look and see if they've got something. I work with a lot of the Alta groups as well.
Yeah. Well, we're based out of Dallas, Fort Worth, so I'm sure they've probably sponsored a few of your things before. So let's kind of jump into it a little bit. I've actually followed you for a few years because I don't struggle in math, but I do struggle in math. I always make the joke when I'm trying to do a math problem in my head. I go, just a minute. There's a reason why I'm a language therapist, and I'm working through some of this stuff. But what is multisensory math exactly?
Well, as the name says, it's multisensory. So we're working with multiple sensory sources. And following the neuroscience, we find that when we use multiple modalities, we're creating memories in different parts of the brain. For instance, if I were teaching something and they could only hear me, they couldn't see me, there were, no visuals or anything, that's one modality. But we now know because of the neuroscience, which we didn't have when I started this. That's what's really incredible. We have huge insights now because of the neuroscience that began in the 1990s, the fMRI studies, where we can see what parts of the brain are active in different activities. It's helped us to define math difficulties. It's complicated our lives because there's not a simple definition either. And so we have to look at what parts of the neurocognitive processes are either not working efficiently, not communicating with each other. So for example, I taught a student in my summer program last summer, and he was going into 6th grade, functioning at a 1st grade level of math. And one day, after reviewing all of the testing and my work with him, his mother said, "Do you think he has dyscalculia?" I said, "Well, certainly he has trouble with math. It just has nothing to do with math." And that was because his processing speed was below the 5th percentile and his working memory was at the 1st percentile.
Wow.
So this poor young man was not having a vehicle for receiving language, repeating it to move it to long-term memory. So an analogy I would make is I always ask parents and teachers in workshops, I'll say, "Do you talk to yourself?" Well, I talk to myself all the time. I talk to my computer and my dishwasher. I tell myself when I'm doing things, reminding myself to do things. I talk out loud. Sometimes I'm just talking internally. But that's one of the ways that we reinforce our memory.
Yeah.
And so a child who cannot repeat what you say, who cannot continually create that loop, has trouble moving things to long-term memory.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have learning challenges that impact learning in general. Do you want to call that dyscalculia? That's a fine point. Because if we talk about what dyscalculia and trouble with math is, it's all dependent on our neurocognitive processes. But is it primarily because there's a specific cause related to math, or is it general, just learning challenges that are so severe it makes it very difficult for the child to learn? And even with that, we can find ways to help that student, because this young man, within 3 weeks, was building 3-digit numbers in manipulatives
Wow.
for me on a place value mat and doubling and halving them.
Wow, that's incredible. That's
And
truly
so
incredible.
we can make major impacts for many students.
Wow.
So likewise, I had a teacher near me. I was training the math coaches. She was in with the general education teachers, and she said, well, I have a child I have to teach, and it's challenging because he speaks only Turkish. He has an interpreter, but he's blind, and I can't
Oh my
use numbers
gosh.
because he's learning Braille. And I said, well, his hands are his eyes. How are you using manipulatives? So there are ways to help almost every child with math, but you just have to know what they are, and it can't be same old business as usual.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
So multisensory math, what it is, like multisensory structured language in the Orton Gillingham tradition, we know going back to Maria Montessori, 1907, her first learning center is hands-on instruction. There's motor memory, there's tactile memory, and the most important one we don't take into consideration is the visual imagery that supports our reasoning in mathematics. And so when a child has manipulatives and learns magnitude, it's not enough to just say, these are base 10 blocks and this is what 10 looks like. Well, if they don't know how that relates to the beauty and symmetry of our place value system, they have no idea of magnitude. What does 10 million look like? And so that magnitude piece is part of our math reasoning. And so we can't stop using manipulatives when a child is in third grade. That visual imagery is critical to understanding what operations look like, how quantities look, and in fact, magnitude has mass. When they get to middle school, they have to understand that things that are bigger often weigh more. Those concepts are just not articulated enough for our challenged learners.
Interesting.
And they don't have that ability to abstract. So multisensory math is using all sensory areas to teach math. But my approach is slightly different in that I'm really interested in the intersection between language and math. Because once you know what 5 is, you're starting to develop numeracy. You can count 5 fingers. You can recognize the die pattern of 5 on a die, playing dice. But once you teach the number 11, you're teaching place value.
Mm-hmm.
And what we know from evidence is that students who struggle need concise instructional language.
Mm-hmm.
Think about trying to teach a student with dyslexia something that's a long verbiage, long string of words, and they can't retain it. The example I would give you is Theophilus thistle, the successful thistle sifter, sifted a batch of unsifted thistles. And with Theophilus thistle, the successful thistle sifter, sifted a batch of unsifted thistles. Where are the sifted thistles that Theophilus thistle, the successful thistle sifter, sifted? Now, you can't remember that.
I can't even say it. I don't know if I can understand it.
Yeah, but imagine if I said to you, repeat after me, Thea,
Yeah.
Theophil,
Theophil.
Theophilus,
Theophilus.
Theophilus,
Theophilus.
Theophilus, the successful,
Theophilus.
say that, be successful,
The sex.
be successful, be successful.
The successful.
Now, all I'm doing is illustrating that if we teach under our Orton Gillingham principles, incremental, sequential, cumulative, and thorough, with multisensory input and adequate practice to mastery, we can teach anything.
Mm-hmm.
Once you teach with all sensory areas and you see the efficacy of it, you can't teach anything any other way, whether it's history, science, literacy, or math. And I think many of our math teachers really don't, they never hear that and they don't understand it because most teachers teach math the way they were taught. Only now, after being in this over 20 years, am I encountering teachers who have had a course in using manipulatives at the university level. And it's very, very rare.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Melissa with Kids First Dyslexia Services. I am excited to share with you my private practice. Kids First Dyslexia Services is a private practice that specializes in dyslexia therapy. Each one-on-one session focuses on instruction specific to your child's needs in a nurturing environment that develops self-esteem, builds confidence, and fosters a sense of accomplishment, resulting in happier kids with higher levels of achievement. We provide a professional, personalized experience, always putting the child first. We value the relationships with both our students and parents because strengthening skills and overcoming hurdles to achieve desired goals and success is a team effort. For more information, please visit www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com. That is www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com.
Hi there. This is Amy Rodenroth, owner of Discovery Dyslexia Services. So tell me if any of these situations are familiar to you. Your dyslexia teacher/therapist has suddenly retired unexpectedly, and you do not have the personnel to fill the space. Or you do not have enough trained teachers or therapists for the number of students who have qualified for dyslexia services, and you need a trained teacher or therapist quickly, like yesterday quickly. Or you need a teacher to provide compensatory services, and you do not have anyone that can provide what's needed. Well, what do? I'm going to tell you what you can do. You can call Discovery Dyslexia Services. Discovery Dyslexia Services can help you with your various dyslexia concerns. We have multiple CALTs who can provide virtual small group therapy. We can also train your teachers in most dyslexia curricula, either virtually or on site. Just let us know how we can help support you. For more information, go to our website at www.discovereed.com. Let me spell that for you. DYSCOVEREAD.com. I don't know, it's a funny name, but we're providing huge services for our dyslexic population. So keep in mind, Discovery Dyslexia Services, covering all your dyslexia needs. Let's return to the show.
I had made a note while you were speaking about teacher recognition of these weaknesses and how I think that there should be some level of reporting of what they recognize as weaknesses in the student so that they can report out to team committee members that can nip it in the bud before it becomes too late.
Critical. It's critical in math as in literacy. The earlier you get intervention, the better the outcome.
I don't think we have enough support, though, from what I hear in the schools for teachers recognizing that difficulty. And then when a child is very seldom identified with a math disability, everybody's heard me say this before, it's almost like it's louder and slower of the same thing they were doing before without changing, maybe providing that manipulative.
But also, believe it or not, what's really interesting is that we ask our preschool and kindergarten teachers to look for red flags for reading failure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oral language is a huge cue. So the child who's in kindergarten or preschool and is mispronouncing things, that auditory processing, who has trouble verbalizing what they want, they have word finding difficulties, they have trouble with that oral language of putting together syntactical units, they're also at risk for math. And so we can start identifying that very early.
And is that the reason why a lot of times when you remediate the reading, the parents have been coming to me, some of my parents will come to me and say, well, the reading has gotten a lot better, but now they're really struggling with math.
That's exactly it. And yet there are other reasons for that, Melissa. And so, for example, some early math concepts can be supported with visual imagery and constructions, tactile interactions, and they get that. So they're sailing along and they're sort of doing okay. And then as things get more complex and more words become important in the math, and teachers teach procedurally, which is based on words, do what I tell you to do in what order, and then they hit multiplication, we now know that multiplication facts are language dependent. So the analogy I'm going to give you is, if I asked you to look at each other right now and name the 13 original colonies, the first thing you would do is construct a map of the east coast of the United States and you'd start ticking down that visual map in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
There is no map for 6 times 7 is
Right.
42. But we have numeracy and subitizing where we can support addition and subtraction facts with dice and domino patterns and dot patterns and 10 frames, so they can see it and imagine it in their brains as they're calculating. That visual imagery supports mathematical reasoning.
Makes so much sense.
So I want you to think of a domino.
Yes.
And on that domino, we have a 3 and a 4. And you can see that and you know it. You've learned it as 7. And I say, let's add 7 to 6. I'm going to add the 4, bundle my 10, and add the rest, 13.
Mm-hmm.
But it also supports subtraction. Once you learn the addends of 10, and you say, oh, wow, I have to subtract 7 from 23. If we decompose 7 as 3 and 4, I subtract 3 to get to 20. And in my mind, I see that 4, 20 minus 4 is 16. I don't have to memorize that word retrieval fact.
Mm-hmm.
I can see it.
But
So,
Marilyn, here's where I come in with my math weakness.
yeah, I know. I was anticipating that.
I have a hard time holding that in my memory to be able
So
to.
that's where adequate practice to mastery is.
Okay.
So think of your same thing you do in literacy, Melissa. You've got your visual review deck, and you have the child naming that's a apple at, and they trace it. Well, you can do the same thing with math. Create that domino pattern of the addends of 7.
Mm-hmm.
Practice to automaticity. Apply and use consistently to develop automaticity. But you don't teach all 6 syllable types at the same time.
Right, right.
So we teach fewer facts at a time to develop mastery over time.
Makes sense. And not start with 7. 7's one of the harder numbers.
It's so funny because I use 7 all the time, and I use it throughout the workshop at different levels. And then I say, now, this is the same thing as in math. I want you to learn it with these numbers and then learn to apply it in the same way with other numbers. And so we want the students to experience quantity awareness. We want them to see quantity patterns that have nothing to do with numbers and to be able to visualize those. And so your warm-up might be, here's a domino and some flat glass marbles. Arrange them in a pattern that makes 7. Can you change that to another pattern that makes 7? Well, if 3 and 4 make 7, you move one of those marbles, and now you've got 5 and 2. Can you visualize 5 and 2 on a domino? But we know that we want to start with smaller numbers. You're absolutely right, Melissa. We have neuroscience that says that the human brain can recognize up to 4 without counting, and no matter the pattern. They can be 4 in a row, they can be 4 in a dice pattern. That's 4, I know it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is from an article by a man named Douglas Clements. For your audience, it's called subitizing. Subitizing. What is it? Why teach it? It's really good for people like yourself who are language therapists, for parents. It's available on the web, I'm sure illegally because it's copyrighted, but it's available. It's out there, and it's easy to read and easy to understand. And there are 2 levels to subitizing, which is the automatic recognition of quantity. Start with a child and throw 1 die in a paper bowl. Can you name that quantity? Can you throw 2 dice in a bowl and name that quantity? And if you're teaching 1 digit like 7, that can be made several ways. And that, by the way, is our first grade standard. First grade.
Yeah. Wow.
And kindergarten is automatic recognition of all the addition and subtraction within 5. And that's where we start with a student who's struggling.
Yeah.
No matter what the age. Just like we start sound symbol correspondent with an 18-year-old, if that's what they need. You may teach it differently, but then we start also to go beyond that. So anything over 4, we want to put in a pattern that's recognizable. So now We're going to learn all the add-ins of 6 or all the add-ins of 5. Now we throw 2 dice in a bowl. How many times can you roll something that makes 5? Let's draw our patterns first so we know what we're looking for. You use that. This is traditional OG.
Yeah.
Where's my near point reference?
Yeah.
It's next to me on the desk. I don't have to retrieve it. It's right there as long as I can't pull it up myself. And so you're playing a lot of games and you're practicing visual patterns that then you can apply at the abstract level. So that sensitizing is important.
It's interesting as you were talking because, like I said, I'm not great at math, but I'm not horrible, kind of in between.
Yeah.
But I can remember, my mom was a teacher and I was always good at language arts. And then she ended up being my teacher in 4th grade. And she would drill and kill my summers with math worksheets. She'd set the timer and we'd go, go, go. And, I'm sure it helped with my automaticity. But at the same time, I dreaded.
Yeah, but you didn't get that concrete and pictorial level.
Right. But I can remember as an older student doing the domino dots on my paper, trying to add, and I don't know where I came up with it. I don't know if somebody showed me how to do that. But even now, I kind of when I'm counting in tens, I go 10 into 20 into 30 into 40, and I'm counting that way with my fingers. I'm doing it as an adult in her mid-50s. Why are we discouraging our kids in elementary school not to use their fingers, not to use the manipulatives? Because I can remember talking to teachers and they're like, well, they still have to use their fingers and we're trying to discourage that. And I'm like, well, why? What's wrong with that?
Well, it's like we all use our fingers.
Right.
All of us. And we all talk to ourselves. I don't want them to rely on our most primitive source if they don't have to. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you a higher level analogy here. Mm-hmm. You're both language people. Mm-hmm. We would never take a 3rd grader who has failed to learn to read efficiently and say, that's it, just stop teaching them to read. We would never do that. We would continue trying to teach them to read. And yet, how many students are just written off in 3rd grade and given a calculator? Mm-hmm. We abrogate our responsibility for teaching and give it over because we think that's going to help the child, and it isn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my student who has his own home renovation company, payroll, people working for him, he has to do all this math, estimate jobs and materials and everything. And he didn't learn to read until he was 18 years old. He was at the university level and he used to ride a bike to his literacy lessons, and I got him through university. But he did an interview for my practicum group. I have a math practicum in 3 levels, just like Alta and MSLIC and OG. Mm-hmm. And they were interviewing successful people with dyslexia who had struggled in math. And he made the statement that the worst thing that ever happened to him was they gave him a calculator because he didn't learn his math facts until he was an adult. Wow. And he was struggling with so many other academic things at the time. And I love calculators and don't, trust me, I believe in accommodations, but I think we can't abrogate our responsibility for teaching to a piece of technology.
Right.
Because our students need to be able to know whether they've gotten the right change. They need to be financially literate as adults. They need to be able to do some simple calculations. And so I think we give up on students way, way too early because it's not convenient for us.
Yeah. And doesn't that also develop cognitive processes as well? If they are learning to do all of that, they're just developing that part of the brain.
Yeah, I mean, we know that the more a person retrieves information, the stronger the neural connections for lasting memory. And so we are not really orchestrating the math in ways that many of our students with learning challenges can learn and retain what they've learned. Then there's so many new wonderful things coming out now that parents and teachers need to know about. There's a big emphasis on something called interleaving. You can do a Google search on interleaving. There's a good link from Coursera. I don't know if you know of the free courses for people, Coursera. Yeah. Barbara Oakley, who teaches a course on how to learn and memory, is in there. But there's some really just brief things you can look up. So the topic of interleaving is different than block practice. When you're doing block practice, your teacher is maybe doing division or multiplication. And you want to really work on that to develop automaticity for the directionality, the sequence, the meaning, the visualization of it, all of that. But you also need to maintain what you've already learned. So block practice is practice on what you're learning at the moment. And we need that repetitive practice. Math is not a spectator sport. It takes practice. And so we need to practice it. But then interleaving is like saying Throwback Thursday. Guess what, gang? We're going to get out the manipulatives and do some subtraction with regrouping. Let everybody remember what that is. You know, you can be an algebra teacher and say, we're going to go back and look at place value today because tomorrow we begin polynomials. And it's just another form of place value. And so that idea of maintaining what we do, I mean, you're teaching 6 kinds of syllables and maybe you're on to silent E or R controlled or vowel teams. You put some closed syllables in that deck. You know, you're maintaining what you've taught. And so that becomes really important for teachers to know that you don't just lockstep move through a curriculum and never revisit. And also when you revisit, you must show what the concepts look like in math and support reasoning.
That's really cool. I'm just like in awe.
Yeah, she's taking notes.
I'm studying. I'm going to go back to school with Marilyn.
I'd love for you to do. I'd love to have some of you do this and then see what a difference it makes in your students' lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there are pieces of the language lesson, like the oral language component of the lesson, the comprehension component. You can do math word problems. You don't have to just do paragraphs.
Right. Right.
And I'd like you to think about something I was discussing this morning with a researcher, and that is that when our students read a paragraph, they don't have to act on each sentence. But when they read a math word problem, they do. And math word problems should probably be written like recipes, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but they're not.
They're not. That just tricks the kids.
Yeah, and our students with dyslexia look at that paragraph and they say, honey, mark C and move on. I'm not going to do this. I'm not even going to try because I'm going to fail.
Yeah, when they already have problems with text structure and literacy.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there are a lot of things we can do, like just stop at the period, put your pencil down, look at that sentence, really understand it. Can you draw a picture? Because the What Works Clearinghouse practice guide on problem solving says if they can draw a picture, they can solve a problem. We can have our students draw pictures sentence by sentence and alter them and change them and predict what they're going to have to calculate. They can do far more than we give them credit for if we just don't make them read all that language and try to hold it in working memory to figure out what it all means.
You know, you're making me think. We just had 2 episodes with Joan Sedita, and she talked about writing across the curriculum, and she said that math shouldn't be ignored.
No.
You know, and that so many math teachers think, well, it's not language, you know, so we're not going to.
Oh, no, it's really important. So, you know, when we think about even, you know, at that basic level of reading, one of the ones I illustrate in my word problem presentation is a 2nd grade word problem. And it involves words in it for decoding that some of our students with reading struggles would not be able to read, like the word biscuit. It's got a French UI in it. And maybe they haven't learned digraphy A and they can't read the word sweater. So we can teach them that this person who wanted to buy things for his 2 dogs for a holiday, and he wanted to buy 2 of these things that start with B. And a student can draw a circle for each dog bed and put the letter B on it twice. And then he wanted to buy 3 things that started with S. And if I can't read that word, I know it's a thing and it starts with S. So he gets 2 B's and an S for each dog. What's the question? How many things did he buy in all? I can answer that from my picture.
That's a really great idea.
So even if a child can't decode all the words, they can still do the math reasoning.
To kind of piggyback on what you were talking about with the block learning that you learn in a block.
The interleave versus block learning, right?
Yes. So I think that kind of tied in with my question about why does it seem that either by being absent or by not understanding one concept in math causes such a poor foundation for future math development? So missing just
Well,
one.
because that's one of the things you had in your list of questions for me. And how is literacy different than math? I want you to imagine that in literacy, we're building structures. That sound symbol correspondence, then we build syllables, and then words, and then longer syntactical units, phrases, clauses, eventually to sentences and paragraphs and connected text.
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot give a child who has just learned 6 kinds of syllables Shakespeare to read.
Right.
It's incremental and incremental complexity development. In math, it's a vertical hierarchy of concepts. So imagine that addition is putting together, and it doesn't matter whether it's 3 plus 4 or 3x squared plus 4x squared.
Okay.
The same concept applies. So as we add new concepts, we build on what we previously knew. So once we learn our addends up to 10 and our counting sequence, and more importantly, matching the quantity represented by the number to the number and its word for the number. So just as we do linkages in literacy,
Mm-hmm.
the sound symbol correspondence, and that in these specific circumstances, A will say ah.
Mm-hmm.
Closed by a consonant, the A says ah.
Mm-hmm.
Later, in math, that addition is putting together and subtraction is taking from is our immature version of subtraction. There is another meaning of subtraction called comparison. So what is the difference between 7 and 3? And we can illustrate what that looks like with cubes. So if you have 2 different colors of Unifix cubes and you have a rod of 7 that's orange and you have a rod of 3 that's green, you can literally lay them next to each other and see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a more sophisticated version of subtraction. Then we learn place value. I said earlier, the minute you teach the number 11, you're teaching place value. You're teaching bundling of tens. And so that's a concept, the way we organize our place value system, the way we organize quantities. And think about it for a moment. I talked about subitizing and recognizing dice patterns of 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
Well, imagine recognizing 3 bundles of 10 and 4 bundles of 10 and 3 bundles of 100.
Mm-hmm.
Or 4 bundles of 100 and 4 bundles of 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's human nature, going back millennia, to organize things in groups so that we don't have to count them again.
Yeah.
That's what subitizing is based on. So with young children, once you recognize 3 and 4, you can build that place value system and recognize 3 tens and 4 tens and build 2-digit numbers on a place value map with manipulatives. We have to stop telling children what the values are, what are they worth, and expecting them to understand it. They need to physically build the place value system to understand it, and to understand addition and subtraction with regrouping. And because you tell them that a piece of plastic is worth 10 doesn't mean they know it or understand it.
That makes sense.
Right.
So when they build it, they understand it. So the place value system is a real foundational skill. Our students need to understand that concept before moving forward. And so all of that is based on language and visual representations and tactile constructions. And so I firmly believe that our students need to build quantities and build the place value system, and they need to bundle things to make 10. And I know you can use straws and coffee stirrers and things like that because it's easier for us to carry them. But it doesn't teach our students a value in terms of magnitude unless it has bulk and weight. So that's why I use craft sticks. And I use craft sticks and place value mats until the students understand regrouping. Once they understand regrouping, I will transition to base 10 blocks.
Okay.
Because they need them for testing.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to pick, and this is one of the words from my presentations and my courses, and that is manipulatives need to be efficient and effective for what you're teaching. And it's not always convenient for us as teachers.
Right.
Because craft sticks are heavy. I travel with 60 and 70 pounds of baggage just in manipulatives when I go to train people. So that article, Subitizing What Is It, Why Teach It, is really a critical article for teachers of young children and anyone who teaches intervention. It's an easy article to read and understand. There's another article from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics in their older articles called 10 is the Magic Number. And it's about a second grade teacher who was reflecting on the fact that there are countries that spend more time on numeracy than we do in the United States. Yeah. And their students have better outcomes later on, 4 and 5 years later.
Wow.
And so spending sufficient time on numeracy and place value, or going back with older children and reviewing that, will make a huge difference. And so if you have a 4th grader or 5th grader who doesn't understand place value, think of it as seeds that another teacher has planted, and all you have to do is water them to make them grow. Go back and teach it differently with an appropriate manipulative, and you will find that you can clear up place value confusions rather rapidly. Mm-hmm. That's another piece that's different in terms of reading and math. You can make huge differences in math by going back to foundation skills, teaching them differently to automaticity so they understand them, can visualize them and know them, and then they can move forward almost to grade level content.
This completes part 1 of our interview with Marilyn Zecher. Join us next week as we conclude our discussion. The Dyslexia Duo podcast hosts are Amy Rodenroth,
Melissa Dean.
Our producer is Greg Rodenroth.
You can find us on Facebook at The Dyslexia Duo.
Email us any questions or comments at thedyslexiaduo@gmail.com.
Awareness is so important. Share this podcast with your friends,
family,
and teachers.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.